This is Rosie with Out of the Box with Rosie Tran. I'm here today with Graham Elwood, comedian, documentary filmmaker, and good friend. How are you, Graham?
I'm good.
What's up?
Not much. What's up?
Well, the reason I asked you here because I wanted to know all about your Afghanistan documentary film.
It was so funny. I'm going to take the gum out of my mouth. Way to go, professional.
What made you decide to start becoming a documentary filmmaker and filming something as interesting as your travels to Afghanistan?
I just sort of fell into it. You know, I was offered in July of 2004. I was at the Improv in Hollywood and ran into Mike Burton, a comic I had known from Chicago, and I knew he would.
Are you from Chicago?
Yeah.
You just said Chicago with a Chicago accent.
That's right.
That I knew from Chicago.
From Chicago. He was like drinking a pop, and then we found some mopes, and we had a beef sandwich.
I've never heard you talk like that till just now, and all of a sudden Chicago. It was like if I'm from Louisiana, but I'm not like, oh hey, how you doing, honey? Oh, my dog Mitzi is climbing on the back of my chair.
What's up, Mitzi? When I came in, you have two dogs, right?
I have two dogs. They're named after comedy club owners.
And they're running around, and my first question was, who let the dogs out?
Are you a comedian, Graham?
I love any opportunity to say who let the dogs out. I will take it every time. So Mike asked me to go to Afghanistan, and I was like, you know, he told me all about it, and he had been sending comics over there, and I was like, oh, wow, this sounds crazy. And I knew, you know, that I had heard of some comics going to Afghanistan, and a couple had gone to Iraq, and I was like, wow. And
when was the first year that you went?
2004. It was August of 2004. So then I went home, and I talked to my friend, who's also like my writing partner, Tim Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, dude, I don't know. I'm kind of scared of this idea. And he goes, oh, you got to go. And he goes, bring a camera. We'll make a documentary. I was like, okay.
Wow, that's how easy it was. I
just brought a little camcorder with me, really. This is 2004, so you were still using like tape, a mini DV tape. So I went over there and just, I went over there with the comic Pete Johansson, and we just, did this crazy tour that Mike Burton had set up, and you're going to a lot of small fire bases. You know, you do some big bases, but it was like small bases. And I just brought a camera and was just shooting the whole time. And it was kind of a crazy experience. It was a little more than I bargained for. And
that's like the definition of guerrilla filmmaking.
That's exactly. I mean, literally. And I brought a tripod, and I would set up the tripod just to tape the shows. So I taped all the shows, and then I was holding it by hand for all the other stuff. Like, we're riding on Black Hawk helicopters, and we're riding in Humvees, and just crazy stuff.
And just so the listeners know, what is the name of your documentary?
It's called Laffghanistan. And it's Laff. It's called Laffghanistan Comedy Downrange. It's available as a pay what you think is fair download if you go to Comedy Film Nerds.
Okay.
And you can pay.
Which is your podcast?
That's my podcast, Comedy Film Nerds. So if you go to comedyfilmnerds.com, you can get Laffghanistan. And it's like a feature-length documentary. It's about 89 minutes. And it's basically just what being in a war zone is like through the eyes of a comedian. I'm
actually jealous. I was scheduled to go to Afghanistan, and then I guess there was a huge bomb attack right before I was scheduled to leave. So they rerouted us to Iraq and Kuwait, which was also amazing.
Oh, wow. When did you go to Iraq?
3 years ago, I went to Iraq and Kuwait. It was a wonderful, positive experience. And I'm kind of irritated because I'll tell people I go, and a lot of people give you props and stuff like that. But I've had people, you were just on base and this and that, and you didn't really see Iraq. I'm all.
Oh, wow. People say that, the only person who can say that is someone that's been there and walked around Baghdad. If you haven't done that, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
I thought it was a pretty intense experience.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And people were like, oh, whatever, it's not that big. I'm just like, okay, man. Like, I'm not claiming that I know what it's like.
I'm not a soldier.
I'm not a soldier.
Yeah,
I don't know what that's like.
I've
never been in combat.
Yeah.
But I've been on a helicopter that started shooting at something. I've had rocket attacks.
That's happened. We drove on the most dangerous street at the time. It was the most dangerous street in the world, quote unquote. It had the most bomb attacks in whatever. It was in downtown Baghdad, and I had bodyguards, and I had to wear body armor. I was like, this is kind of scary.
Yeah, it's like no, it's for real. That's the thing when you go over there. You're like, oh, damn, like this is not a joke. And when people are like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, I'm like, all right, man, like it could happen at any time. And
well, I think people are desensitized out here because they don't really show that much war footage.
Yeah, and also too, I think you have like maybe in LA, you might have, people in LA, like if you went to high school in LA, how many people from your high school joined up after 9/11? Whereas if you went to school like at many
Chicago,
yeah, Chicago, you went right to the recruiters. So yeah, it's about time you manned up there and got yourself a weapon. So I knew people who are around your age, 28, 29, 30, who 9/11 happened when they were in high school.
Yeah,
and a dozen guys from their high school joined up. They were at the recruiters on the 12th, and so I don't think you have as much of that in like Los Angeles,
I think in some of the maybe more blue collar areas, but
Sure.
definitely in Hollywood, LA, and a lot of, there's a lot of kind of wealth discrepancy here. I just did a show in Irvine last week, and I said, Irvine's for those of you who don't know, Irvine is a very wealthy Caucasian
Yeah, it's very white
area in Orange County, California, which is about an hour south of here. And I have some military jokes, and I like to do them usually when I'm in San Diego or more of that type of area. But I was like, oh, has anyone here been in the military? There was dead silence.
Yeah.
Not one person clapped. They didn't even woo for the military. It was just like, okay, I'm not going to do those jokes, I guess.
Thank you. They're defending your freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a crazy experience. And as you know from who's the tour that you were with? Was it Scott Kennedy's tour or was it?
No, I went with a small company in Arizona that I think unfortunately is out of business now. And it wasn't a comedian. The guy who booked it was actually a former military.
Uh-huh.
And he was just trying to bring troops over there. And I went with
Bring comics over there.
Yes. Bring comedians. Yeah. Comedians to entertain the troops. And I went with Honest John, who's been on BET, and a ventriloquist named Willie Brown, and also I'm blanking, but for some reason I think that was just it. It was just the three of us, and we went to a bunch of small fobs and small bases. And the reason I was so grateful to go is because I had done a show at a casino about a week before, and I told at the audience that I was going, and a soldier came up to me and started crying and basically told me that, he really respected me, and that was an honorable thing to do, to risk my life to do that, and that he was on the verge of suicide. And the last thing he remembered before they sent him into the foxhole where he was for 6 to 10 months, I think he said, I think it was 10 months, was he went to the comedy show on base. And the thing that kept him alive was the comedian's jokes, thinking about the comedian's jokes. And it just made me, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it gives you like a view of what we do. Like it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm a comedian in LA and nobody gives a shit. I'm just like telling jokes to drunks and what am I doing with my life? And then you go over there and you have that experience. Just saying that you're going to go, somebody thanks you. The way they thank you is just like humbling, right? Like you're thanking me, like I'm gonna go tell dick jokes for 2 weeks, and you have a gun. Like you're talking about foxholes and that I think is sort of the thing that like it transformed me, and that's sort of what my documentary was just trying to show, what that experience is like. First of all, I'm over there, I'm just like, what the fuck, like I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, first of all, I think it's amazing that you did the documentary in general, because for those of you listeners who don't know Graham, I consider you to be a surfer dude, hippie, vegan, like the opposite of what people think of when they think of the military.
Yeah. I do yoga.
Not in a bad way. You're hilarious and awesome, but I just, you're not the amped up guns and, the kind of quote unquote stereotypical image that people have. So of someone who's supportive of the military, right? There's a stereotype that it's like a redneck or whatever. Right winger. And you're the exact opposite of that. You're doing this and supporting the troops and, doing a documentary about it and stuff like that. So that's, already you're like breaking stereotypes.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the thing is like, I believe that, I'm very liberal in a lot of my views. I'm not a Democrat. I don't like the two-party system, but I'm definitely left of center on a lot of my views. And I also love this country. And there's a lot about it of that Bush was doing that I didn't necessarily agree with, but anyone who's willing, it's an all volunteer military.
Yeah.
Anyone
much.
who's willing to sign up to go over there, if me going over there telling jokes can help somebody get through a 12-month deployment, which I can't even begin to imagine what that would be like, let alone not for that, also for them, but their families back home. Like, I'm sure your family was freaking out for the 2 weeks you were gone.
Actually, I didn't tell them till after. I actually didn't tell them until afterwards because my parents are very, very, yeah.
Right.
No comment.
Yeah. My family was just flipping out. And
With worry?
With worry.
Yeah.
And I was telling them, I was like, guys, I'm just going there to tell jokes, and I'm going there for 2 weeks. Like, imagine someone who is also in the infantry, like their job is combat, not a support position, but combat. They're in the infantry, and they're going there for 12 months. And so imagine the stress that puts on the family back home. And that's kind of the thing I kept sort of asking in the movie is, anytime I'd get scared or freaked out or fuck this, I want to get out of here, I'd always go, holy shit, if I'm feeling this,
what are they
feeling? They must be feeling this times 100. And
I think comedy is a good therapy too, because I didn't feel that there was a very strong, I don't want to criticize too much, but I didn't feel that there was a very strong mental health and support system for the military from our government. A lot of soldiers had PTSD. They were coming back stressed out. I went on one base when I went on another USO tour in a non-combat zone, and it was a resort type area where they would send soldiers for R&R after they would come back from Afghanistan for 2 weeks, and that was their mental health.
That was it. 2 weeks. 2 weeks on the beach.
2 weeks in a nicer base, and then back to society. And when you're seeing, I had soldiers that told me some pretty dark stuff. I met soldiers that had seen some pretty brutal murders and other things. That's traumatizing. And I think chilling out at a resort for 2 weeks is definitely not going to solve what you've seen. A little more than
that. The PTSD thing is such a serious issue. I don't think most Americans understand, what it is, what the symptoms and what having PTSD means. Like short-term memory loss and
panic attacks,
stress,
worry,
quick to anger,
irrational thoughts,
feeling like I don't deserve to have PTSD because I didn't have it as bad as somebody else. Everything can be going great, and then something happens
that you snap.
That's not even snaps, or just brings you back there. You hear something, you smell something, and all of a sudden you're back there, and people don't understand. People have no idea what that is at all. They don't. They're just like, oh, snap out of it, or get over it, or Jesus, let it go. And it's just like, you think this is easy? You think, sitting here on a beach and a helicopter flies by and it automatically brings you back to Afghanistan? Do you think that's easy to deal with?
Well, and I think it's probably PTSD is actually a natural reaction for human beings, because if you're in a fight or flight situation, if you're not reactive, then you could get killed. Right.
And also, specific to the military personnel's, in that situation, you gotta suck it up and get on with your job.
Yeah.
But then how do you come back and adjust to society? And
2 weeks on
2 weeks, that's it.
2 weeks in a resort.
2 weeks, wrap it up. I go surfing for 2 weeks, I'm good.
Yeah.
And like you said, I want to add to the point about the soldier that came up to you in tears because he was suicidal and a comedy show helped him. Scott Kennedy, who I went to Iraq with 3 times. I know he passed away in March. He was a really cool guy. He's a really good friend. He's a comic who went over there over 50 times. And we were over in Iraq. I've been to Afghanistan 3 times and Iraq 3 times. Then I was just in Kuwait. And three of the 7 times I've been in those combat zones was with Scott. And his whole thing was going to small bases. And we would do like 3 or 4 shows a day. And it was like, because he knew the value of it. And I remember we got up early and we were going to do like 3 bases in a day, fly all via Black Hawk helicopter. We got a body armor on. We're on the flight line. We're getting ready to go. It's 100 and blah, blah, whatever. It's 140,000 degrees.
Dry heat. It's a dry heat.
It's really great.
It's dry.
It dries out your heart. If you like pissing sand, it's tremendous.
By the way, this is a side note, and I'm sure you're going to tell a very hurtful story, but in the bathrooms in the Middle East, on the bases, they have these pee meters.
Yeah, that show you the color of your pee.
Because it's so freaking hot.
Yeah.
They're like, if your pee is brown, you're going to die.
Yeah, you're dead. You're dead. You're done.
If it's dark orange, then you're almost about to die.
Yeah.
Because that's how freaking hot it is.
Yeah.
And these guys are wearing body armor. 40-pound freaking body armor.
Backpacks and all kinds of shit. And
like all day.
All day. And those uniforms aren't really built to breathe. They're not breathable. It's not like a cycling jacket. So we're sitting there on the flight line, and all of a sudden Scott gets a call that one of the first base we're going to go to they had gotten in a firefight that night, and 2 guys had died. So they locked down the base in that situation, and we're not going there. Obviously, we're not doing a comedy show, and he was just sitting there trying to figure out, okay, we got to reschedule, and because Scott was going over there once a month, he was bringing 2 comics with him like once a month. And I remember just sitting there thinking, like, this is stupid. I feel dumb. Like, some families are getting the worst news today, and I'm just some dumb comic. Like, I'm some Hollywood idiot. And these people, some young, probably in their early 20s, and I just felt, and I was like, fuck. And he's like, what's up? And I go, I just feel like an idiot. Like, we're just like, what are we doing? And he goes, Graham, I had a commanding officer tell me that whenever a comedy show came through the base, the suicide rate dropped. And he goes, we're saving lives. So he goes, I'm going to go back to those bases in 6 months, and I'll get us on some other shows today. We have a mission. We got to keep doing this. And I was just like, you got it.
Laughter does, like, people make fun of it, but laughter does heal. After that soldier told me that, and I have since I started doing the military tours and meeting, and because I have a couple military jokes, and sometimes I'll do them in a normal set because they're, it's not like obscure references or anything. And people will come up to me and they'll say, thank you so much for what you've done. I mean, the gratitude is insane. Mm-hmm. The fans that I've gotten from the USO tours, just as a comedian, I mean, they like follow you like crazy. I've had fans that are military that are in Texas. Anytime you're in Texas, I'm going to invite my whole family out and every single person. They are just so supportive because here's the thing. They have the big bases, and, a lot of celebrity comedians.
They get a lot of shows.
Yeah, they get a lot of shows, and a lot of celebrity comedians come and they go to the big bases, but the little bases in the middle of nowhere where people really, really, really freaking need it, they
get very little.
Yeah.
Every time, when I would do those little bases with Scott, every time it would be like, wow, we haven't had a show here in a year or 9 months or 10 months or whatever. And you were just like, you get to these little bases. And I remember the last show I ever did with Scott Kennedy in January of 2011 was me, him, and Salim Muhammad. And it was, I think it was Camp Gary Owen, kind of near Basra. We were actually near the Iranian, we could see the Iranian border. And it was it was about 120 people total on the base. We did a show in a tent in front of about 30 people, like 2 women, and a lot of young guys, 19, 20. That was their first ever comedy show. And the level of laughter that you got, we're in this little tent. I don't even think we had a microphone. You know what I mean?
Did one without I did several without a microphone. I was just like talking.
Yeah, you're just like yelling like, hey, and you're just like, all right, man, this is the gig. And they're just so thankful. It's the kind of gig that as a comic, you'd be like, it's in a tent without a fucking mic? Like, no way. But then you get there and it's just amazing. And these young guys, it's hard to even put it into words, like we both started stand up when we were young. Like I was like 18, you were like 18, 19, right? Yeah. So we were like punk kids when we started. And these are like young guys who were like going out and doing the toughest job. And some of them have that blank 1,000-yard stare because they've seen too much or whatever.
Yeah. Or had friends die or what. Yeah.
They just had friends die. And so you're just sitting there and that you can bring laughter to them. You suddenly, and then when they thank you, it's so humbling, that they're thanking us. And you're just like, okay. But they always say, you have no idea what it means that you as a civilian coming over here to do this. And it's like, I kind of I'll never understand because I've never been in the military. I'm never going to be deployed in a war zone for 12 months. But like the fact that we get to do that is like such a cool thing. It's such an honor.
And it's such a unique thing. I mean, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and how many people can say they have done something like that? Definitely, it's a unique experience, personal experience, and also, you know, something that you can take with you forever that I think a lot of people can't say that they have even had the opportunity to do.
Well, it's like, how many times? Is this recording?
Yes. It's red.
Are you sure?
Yes.
All right. I don't see the thing moving.
Don't worry.
All right.
Things are moving.
All right. Things are moving because I don't see the bar moving.
Yeah, it's fine. Graham is worried about my audio.
All right. Sorry. I run a podcast too, so I'm paranoid. I'm the tech guy in our show, so I'm always like, wait, what's going on? What's going on?
Is this recording?
What's going on? Who is this? What are they saying? I see it moving. Okay, I see it moving. I see it moving. I'm sorry. This is the worst interview ever. It's all serious, and then, wait, what's wrong with your thing? Is your thing recording? Yeah, so it was, you know, and again, getting kind of back to your initial question of the Laffghanistan, the documentary, was I really wanted to do two things. I wanted to kind of show what it was like through my eyes, because I think it's a little more, I had a friend tell me this, as actually Laura House, who's a very funny comic. She said, you know, Graham, watching this movie, seeing you just as a, you know, she's like, I know you, but also just you're a regular guy. You're not in the military. And seeing what you're going through helped me sort of identify more than if I was watching a soldier, because I'm not a soldier. She goes, I'm a comic. And I get the feelings you're going through about getting ready to have to do a show and you're crying and shit like that, you know, because it's scary. And so that's kind of what the film I wanted to do. And also I didn't realize it was going to have this much impact on like families of military people, because they're getting to see more footage from a
place they've never been allowed to be.
Ever.
They get to relate to their husbands or wives, or they're deployed.
Yeah, their sons or daughters. They're just like, oh, that's what a forward operating base looks like.
That's what they're, because a lot of times I think these people can't relate. You know, they're like, what is my son going through? What is my husband going through? What are they doing? What are they doing out there? Yeah. What's
going on? What does it look like? What are their living conditions? And, you know, I brought a camera. It shows me on a tent, and it shows me, you know, whatever, going to these latrines and all these, you know, the conditions of everything. And then seeing how the locals lived, you know. And so it's like, and so many military people were like, when I'd say, wow, you got my hat's off to you, like, we don't got it tough at all. It's the locals, like the Afghanis, they got it tough, you know, because they got nothing, and there's minefields and all that stuff, you know.
I think too, there's this weird energy with it, because when I was in Iraq, I know some people were grateful to have the Americans there, and some people really did not want us there at all. And so there was this awkward, tense, weird energy. I had a translator that was telling me that, you know, some people wished Saddam was still in power, you know, like he was telling me, oh, a lot of locals really love Saddam. And so it's definitely a different point of view than what you would get just listening or watching the mainstream media.
Well, especially Iraq. Iraq is such a different situation than Afghanistan.
Oh, definitely.
Few people understood that. Some people think
it's the same thing. A lot of people don't even understand the war.
I would do that. I would come back and I would say they're like, oh my God, where were you? I was like, I was doing a tour in Afghanistan. They go, oh, that's so crazy. We're in Iraq. And I'm like, two different countries, spelled very differently,
with very different political climates.
Yeah. And there's Iran between them.
Yeah.
So I would say to people when they'd say, what's the vibe in Iraq? And I'd say, well, it depends. I go, in the Kurdish region of Iraq, they're very happy we're there because Saddam was
oppressing them
hard. I mean, there was mass graves. It was genocide. It was awful. It's the only time ever of any Middle Eastern war zone show that I've done where locals who worked on the base were at the comedy show and getting our autographs afterwards. That was in Kurdistan. Like, they were like, oh, you're funny, my friend. And their English was decent. And they were like, who let the dogs out? Who?
That's my dog, Mitzi, guarding the house.
There you go, Mitzi. Guard that house.
She's named after Mitzi Shore, owner of the Comedy Store. Which for some reason Graham finds hilarious.
I think it's great. I think it's delightful. So, yeah, that was I don't even remember what I was talking about before.
You were saying you have Kurdish fans.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. So there was fans in the Kurdish region who were like, wow. And then I remember because there's the Shiites, the Sunnis, and the Kurds. Those are the three ethnic groups in Iraq, and they're very different. And then, in some of the western regions, like I did a whole tour of shows in the Anbar province with Scott and Howie Nave, and that was in 2008, I believe, and mostly Marine Corps bases. And Anbar was where there was a lot of insurgency. So we were there in 2008, so they had sort of turned the tide there in 2007. It was during the surge.
And the energy was awkward.
The energy was a little awkward, and that was really like person to person, base to base, like loved were there, hates were there. Like it was like you couldn't make a blanket statement about that region.
Well, I also learned a lot about the region in general that I think, which is another reason I talk about travel sometimes. I think it's very, very, very important for people to travel outside of the U.S. in general to as many different countries as possible. If you're not a comedian, just for fun, enjoyment, because you learn so much about other cultures and in turn about yourself. I didn't know anything about the region before I went. I didn't realize there was a huge Pakistani and Indian immigration population there. I didn't realize there was a huge Filipino population there. Who would think in the Middle East that there's a lot of Filipino people? I mean, that was great for me because I have a lot of jokes about that. But I was like, I didn't realize they would understand that, or that there was even Filipino people living here.
Right.
So it's every single, place that I've gone, I've learned something new. But the Middle East, for sure.
I think every American should travel to a third world country to see what a third world country is like, because like I'm not downplaying or negating any of the problems that they have in America, but America's still pretty nice. You know what I mean? Like I've fed kids in Afghanistan through barbed wire, and they were in a minefield. They ran along the side of a minefield to get food, and it's like there's a downed Russian MiG from the Russian war and or the Soviet war rather, and it's like, my nieces and nephews are never gonna have to worry about minefields. Yeah, like God willing, So you never know what the Tea Party has planned. So no new taxes. Claymores everywhere. So like that was, that kind of, when you see that, and there's no amount of video or film footage that can have the impact that being there can have. Seeing it, smelling it.
It's a unique experience. Yeah. I'm trying to get back to my motherland, but I've heard a lot of stories about Vietnam is developing right now. It's not their world anymore. Right. But definitely it's crazy to have relatives that are living in, my dad will send them $500 a month, and that money can feed and house and clothe 20 of my relatives. Yeah. Because the poverty is so bad. It's definitely developing a lot more, and it's more of a resort country, and a lot of tourism to Southeast Asia right now. But it's just crazy to know that there's still places like that out there, and yet we're wasting so much resources over here. I know. It drives me nuts. There's this one, I think, those memes, those internet memes, where they have a little African kid that's like, you mean you guys have so much clean water that you poop in it? And it's so funny, but it's so sad. Yeah. That we're not, recycling gray water to use in toilets or doing something. I'm a huge environmental person, and when you go to these countries and they don't have running water, or that people are pooping in like a little hole outside in the backyard, you're like, maybe I shouldn't flush. Right. Maybe I shouldn't just, buy a bottle of, bottled water and drink half of it and then throw it away. Yeah. Exactly. And especially when, there's South American countries having water revolutions, and other countries, you just feel so disconnected. And the sad part is, I think that if the average American who was so wasteful really knew, like you said, you want people to travel to third world countries, if they really knew what it was like, I don't think they would be that wasteful. I don't think Americans are bad people. No, I think most people just don't know. I think there's just a level of just ignorance, just like, oh, we'll be fine, or like,
And it's like, if you really knew where that came from or how it was made or how many resources, how wasteful it is, and I think there's just like little things that people can do. I remember I was told, someone was like, Graham, do you leave the faucet on? This is a long time when I was in college. And I think we had like a speaker or something. And the guy was like, do you leave the faucet on when you brush your teeth? And I was like, yeah. He goes, all right, next time you brush your teeth, put a cup underneath the faucet and just see how much water goes in.
Was it a lot?
It was like a couple, it was like 6-7 ounces of water. And whatever, it takes me less than 60 seconds to brush my teeth. And he's like, okay, so you do that twice a day. And he's like, add it up. And I was like, holy shit, how much water is that? And he goes, all you have to do is just shut the water off when you brush your teeth. And I started looking at things in that framework of like, because I think part of it too is it seems so daunting that you're like, well, I'm just one person. What can I do?
Yeah.
It's like you can save, 50 gallons of water a year by turning off the faucet when you brush your teeth. Like, and when you start looking in those terms, then you go, wow. So, instead of driving my car half a mile, I could walk there. I could take my bike, and I'm saving money. I'm saving, whatever, like, was it carbon monoxide? Carbon dioxide?
You're saving something.
You're saving something. You know what I mean? Like all the pollutants that a car puts in the air, and it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And what's my little car going to do? It's like if everyone just did that little thing, all of a sudden there would be huge changes. I remember when the state of California was having the rolling blackouts like 10, 11 years ago. And they made this big, was, of course, we found out later, was created by Enron. Good group of guys. Good group of guys. And the governor of Texas knew about it. Who is that guy? He became a president. Oh, right. Okay. The state did a whole campaign of like, don't run your major appliances till like after 7 o'clock at night, and keep your thermostats, and don't leave lights on in other rooms. And the state of California, with 45 million people, reduced its usage by like
40%,
15 to 20%, which when you 45 million people, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Like that is a lot. And I think like the recession has made people do that. The high gas prices has made people start to do that.
It's sad that people, it's like their own financial interest has created it, but as long as the change is happening, that's all I care about.
Yeah, as however makes it happen. And so, like when gas hit $5 a gallon, in the short run, my personal finance, I didn't like it, but in the long run, I saw my own habits change. I'm like, I'm going to take the bus. I'm going to ride my bike. And then I was using less gas, which is better for me personally, financially, but also.
And it's healthier. I try to bike a lot, and
Biking's
people
awesome.
think it's crazy in LA. Like, oh, how can you walk? I take the metro a lot. And I had a friend who was staying with me walk from downtown to Santa Monica, which people think sounds insane.
That is insane. That's crazy.
And he actually said it only took him, I cannot quote, but I think he said 2 hours. And I think that's about the same in traffic.
Right. Certain times of day, yeah.
So he actually was walking faster than traffic.
Yeah.
But he was visiting from Europe, and everyone walks in Europe, and he didn't see anything wrong with it. He's like, oh, I just walked, and I wanted to see LA. I was like, okay. And he's like, it took me about 2 hours. I was like, really? That fast?
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, like I live in Santa Monica, so I ride my bike everywhere. I love it. And I've I got a helmet and one of those bright orange jacket or yellow jackets. And I'm a big safety nerd.
But people are crazy in LA. My friend was run over by a car on his bike. But luckily it was a very wealthy person, and they had a big wad of cash in their pocket, which they gave to him.
Wow.
For fear of being sued. So.
Wow.
I'm so sad we have very limited time because of audio issues. Do you have anything you want to promote?
Yeah, if you go to my podcast, Comedy Film Nerds, it's in iTunes. You can also go to comedyfilmnerds.com, Twitter and Facebook, Comedy Film Nerds, and also all my tour dates. I'm at GrahamElwood.com. My Twitter handle is at Graham Elwood. I will be headlining the Improv in Hollywood November 16th. That's a 10 o'clock show. So
I also want to say that you are the co-founder of the LA Pod Podcast Festival, which is a big deal. And that's awesome. And you created that idea all on your own, right?
Not all on my own. No, there's 4 of us that did it. It was Dave Anthony came to Chris Mancini and myself. Dave Anthony is a comic who does a podcast called Walking the Room with Greg Barrett, and he also has written for Comedy Film Nerds, and we have a book out, the Comedy Film Nerd Guide to Movies, that he's written for in 2 years.
So you're a fourth.
Yes.
Of the genius.
Yes, I'm a fourth of genius. I'm 25% genius. So he came to Chris and I and said we should do a podcast festival. We're like, that's a great idea. And then we brought in Andy Wood, who helped start the Bridgetown Comedy Festival.
Okay.
And so the 4 of us we just did our 2nd year in a row, and it's been great. You were there. It was a lot of fun. We had 24 shows the first year. We had 41 shows this year. A lot. It was like almost 800 people came through the doors. It was really cool.
Yeah, so check that out for next year, right?
Yep.
LA Podcast Festival. Follow Graham.
Yep. LAPodfest.com.
I want you guys to please support the podcast. Go to rosietran.com, my website, and go to my store and buy T-shirts and bumper stickers. I know I have my cookies up there, but here's the thing, guys. I only make organic cookies. And I don't use any chemical preservatives, and some of my fans have been complaining that the cookies are stale when they reach them, even though I send them overnight, okay, but they're stale because of no preservatives. So do not order cookies until I find an organic cookie preservative. Otherwise
an organic cookie preservative. That doesn't sound possible.
I know I might have to take my cookies off. I know you guys love the chocolate chip cookies.
An outgoing, easygoing, simple-minded clan member.
So I know the cookies are up there. I need to take them down, but don't order them. They might be stale. And I make them myself. They're made by me, and I spend all the time and energy with the organic chocolate and the organic flour, and then my poor fans get stale cookies. So just buy T-shirts and bumper stickers.
Meow, 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 meow.
Thanks for being on the show, Graham. You guys have been listening to Out of the Box with Rosie Tran.
Yeah, rock and roll.